Hello, my name is Leah Martin, and I am going to present a Google slide presentation about PBIS, which stands for Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports today. And I'm going to focus about the PBIS program at Heritage Eastham Magnet School in West St. Paul. So if you don't know what PBIS is, as I said, it stands for Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports, but basically it's a framework for helping schools sort of create interventions and consistency within their school building surrounding behaviors. And so in the triangle that you see on the screen, there's a Tier 1 level of PBIS, which every single student in the building would have access to. These are things like just being recognized for showing the school-wide behavior expectations, things like that, maybe like a token reward system, and I'll get to some more specific examples in a little while. The yellow portion of the triangle on the screen is sort of the secondary or Tier 2 level of PBIS, and this is for specific behavioral interventions for students who maybe don't respond to the Tier 1 level. And then finally, the red portion of the triangle on the screen is the Tier 3. And that's typically for students, that don't respond to either Tier 1 or 2. But oftentimes it's some student that might have an IEP or some other reason that stands between their ability and their want for participating in the school-wide PBIS program. So today's presentation is really going to follow the guidelines of what's called the TFI, which stands for Tiered Fidelity Inventory. And Minnesota PBIS sort of requires schools that are school-wide PBIS to take this inventory once a year. And this way you can sort of gauge what your implementation level is for PBIS in your building. There's all different components that go along with the TFI, and so I'm just going to go through each of the components and give you some examples of how Heritage Middle School encompasses PBIS through what Minnesota PBIS sort of requires. So when a school logs in to take the TFI, what's on the screen here, I know it's very small font, but these are some of the examples and things that they are looking for. So they look for who's on the PBIS team in a school. What are your school-wide behavioral expectations? What are your discipline policies in your building? What kind of involvement do you have from your faculty? Do you give professional development surrounding PBIS? All of those types of things. So I'm just going to, like I said, go through how we do that at Heritage. And you might be wondering about what Heritage looks like if you've never visited our school. So we have almost 800 students in our building. You can see the breakdown of demographics there, but we're essentially half and half in our building, half white students and then half non-white students. We have about 11% of our population as English learners. We do have a high special education rate at almost 20%, and then our free and reduced lunch percentages hovering around 50%. So keeping that in mind as I kind of explain what we do at Heritage for PBIS. Two of the first components on that TFI inventory, like I was explaining, they ask about a team composition. Who makes up your team, and then what kinds of things do you do at your team meeting? So in our PBIS committee, we have administrators, we have 3 school counselors, we have teachers from each of our teams in the building. Our middle school is set up into houses or teams, and so we have at least 1 teacher from each team. We have at least 1 special education teacher, our school psychologist, and our At Promise Room para, and I'll explain more about what he does in a little bit. We meet at least bi-monthly for our Tier 1 level of PBIS, and then we also have implemented our Tier 2 of PBIS, and that team meets regularly every week. The PBIS coach, that's me. I create the agenda, I keep the team meeting moving, and when needed, I delegate different tasks to different committee members based on need or availability or lots of different reasons. So along with that, every school who implements PBIS sort of looks to have some sort of behavior purpose statement. And so this is Heritage's behavior purpose statement. I'll just read it very quickly. The Heritage PBIS program works to establish and maintain a safe and effective school environment that maximizes the academic achievement and social, emotional, behavioral competence of all students. So the goal is to keep students in class as often as possible so that academics are the mainstay of everybody's day at school, while also helping to support them socially and emotionally when they need those extra levels of support. Okay, another area on the TFI that we are sort of asked to think through as a PBIS committee each year are our behavior expectations and how those expectations are taught in the school. You can see the picture there. It shows some of a poster that we have in each classroom throughout our building. It's our classroom expectations, and you can see the big words: honesty, academics, behavior, integrity, teamwork, and success. Those are what our acronym for habits. Those are the words that make up our habits. And then below each of those is just our classroom expectations. We have a big matrix of expectations in each of our major areas. So the lunchroom, the hallways, even the buses, restrooms, every major area you could think of in a school. We make sure that we have a matrix that's followed. And so during the first week of school, all teachers go through that matrix and they teach some specific areas, and then we reteach certain areas based on our data as the year continues. Additionally, each Tuesday in our building is PBIS Day in our homeroom, and so that's my chance for videos and lessons and reminders can be pushed out to students about behavior or upcoming events, things like that. And then, as it says down at the bottom there, sometimes teachers like to teach different parts of their classroom hour. Like, for instance, science teachers might teach expectations for labs that are different than expectations for a lecture portion of the class, or that might be different than working in a group environment, or just silent work time. So thinking through what a specific discipline might have for expectations in different times of their class, we teach those expectations over and over throughout the school year and school day. Okay, so the next thing the TFI asks about are problem behavior definitions and then our discipline policies. So I have a couple of pictures on the screen there. On the left, right over here, this is our list of major behaviors and minor behaviors that our staff came up with. I know it's hard for you to see, but basically, teachers came together and voted on what kinds of behaviors can be managed in the classroom. Maybe something like a minor disruption, for instance. Those are called minor behaviors. And then major behaviors are things like maybe fighting, or if swearing happens or something like that. Something that's major behavior that would need to be handled by the office, for instance. And then over on the right, this is what we call a flow chart for our behavior in our building. And so at the top, teachers would think about, okay, is this a minor behavior or is it a major behavior? If it's a major behavior, then the teachers would send the student to the office, and then it kind of lists out all of the steps. If it's not a major behavior, then what are the steps the teachers need to follow? And so this gets handed out at the beginning of each school year and can be referenced as teachers need throughout the year. The middle part here is something that's really unique to our building. We have something that's called an At Promise room in our building, and we have right now a man who is our para in there and deals with our behavior referrals first before anyone else. So when a student has to get sent out for a major behavior, that student goes to the At Promise room, and the para can help to regulate the student right in the room, and perhaps that student could go back to class if the regulation happens, right? Otherwise, if it's a behavior that is maybe suspendable or just needs, it's escalated to the point that the at-promise room para can't handle it or can't discipline the child for it, then perhaps the at-promise room para will pass that student on to the assistant principal or maybe a counselor or something like that. So that's how we do our behavior and discipline at our school. Okay, next is our professional development and our faculty involvement. So we are lucky in that our administration is very supportive of our PBIS program. So during workshop week each year, our principal allows PBIS a couple of hours, if not even up to like a half a day sometimes, to go over our PBIS plan for our building. We also do all kinds of things to help staff get trained, fun new reboot or refresh about our program each year. We've done things like an amazing race, all kinds of different things. We also send out a monthly newsletter where we present to staff if the newsletter doesn't come out about just our data, how many referrals we have, things like that. And then if there are any tips to help with some of those data pieces, like if we're noticing students are tardy, how can we help them? Things like that. And then the PBIS coach in our building, again, that's me, I get release time during the day so that I can go in and observe a class that a teacher's having a hard time with, perhaps meet with a teacher to help plan around how to handle a particularly challenging group of students, and so on. I am going to stop the recording now for the first recording, and then I will start up again and do the last few slides in a separate recording. Thank you.